Welcome to the Cursed Scientists section of the U-Reconnect podcast. These segments will each be dedicated to the presentation of certain scientists who were usually operating in the medical field, though not all of them, and who encountered great resistance in having their findings gain recognition within their lifetime. I personally discovered these scientists through the books of French prospective journalist and author Pierre Lance, and a large number of them are French. I thought it was a shame that the books weren't translated in English, and therefore I made it a project to synthesize and translate the chapters about their lives to make them better known to an Anglo-Saxon audience. If you're interested in reading this series, I will give a link in the description to the French version of the books. May these segments be a tribute to their work and hopefully revive interest for their discoveries. Thank you in advance for your interest. Jules Tissot and the potential misunderstanding of the elements of cells. Jules Tissot was a professor of general physiology at the National Museum of Natural History who spent most of his life conducting profound research on the elements of which cells are composed. His research and theories differ from those of Antoine Béchamp on a number of points. However, he saluted Béchamp's work and similarly denounced the Pastorian errors that were to lead conventional medicine to where it is now. The main points on which the theories of Béchamp and Tissot agree is the extreme pleomorphism of living matter and the importance of the evolution of internal microelements in the initiation and development of pathologies. That said, Tissot's theories differ from Béchamp's on one specific aspect in that he does not recognize Béchamp's microzyma as being the primordial living element. Rather, he identifies another basic living organite, as he calls it, the weight-lifting organite, due to its resemblance with weights that are used by bodybuilders. Contrasting to Béchamp, he identifies the microzyma as being the primordial ferment, which, according to its environment, may promote the development of pathology or not. However, let us not get into too much detail for the moment, and let's take a first look at how Tissot came to these conclusions about the organization of life and the development of pathology. Tissot said that his intention was not to destroy all acquired knowledge, but that, in his search for truth, new evidence was brought about and he had to try to make his experiments known to the scientific community so that humanity might progress. His first finding concerns cytology, which is the study and observation of the elements composing the cells. As one might expect, cytology is, in practice, the foundation for biology in that it attempts to explain the chemical and physical mechanisms of the most elementary biological entity. This explains why it is crucial that cytological experiments be conducted with the utmost precision and that the observations reflect the structure of living cells, not after cells are dead, as their components are very likely to have changed. Therefore, if something was wrong with the methods of observation in the first place, then every attempt at observing the cells in their living state would be erroneous. This is the issue that Tissot was denouncing. He had come to realize that the methods employed to fixate the cells before observation under the microscope were in reality destroying the internal structure of the cells. This criticism was only made possible by discovering another fixating method that produced satisfactory and reproducible results, in which Tissot identified the true nature of the cellular's internal structure. To support his findings, Tissot also took numerous pictures showing the integral cell structure and many pictures showing the steps of the destruction the cell underwent when fixated through the mainstream methods. Amazingly, these findings were not welcomed by the scientific community, who reproached Tissot for attempting to demolish their biological dogmas and beliefs. However, Tissot disagreed and replied by stating that he was merely replacing erroneous information with accurate notions of capital importance for the progress of biological and medical research. In reality, there was no demolition, but an automatic crumbling of the false facts that had become scientific truth at that time. Having discovered a righteous way to observe the cells in its living state, Tissot was bound to discover the true structure of our living entities. On numerous occasions, he pointed out that the greatest example of mainstream cytology's flaws reside in the mitochondria, which is only, according to Tissot, the debris of the cell's true structural elements, the weight-lifting organites, as he calls them. However, Mr. Tissot might have been better off knowing his ancestors' sayings, more specifically one from Jacques de la Palisse, which stated that it is impossible to make disappear what does not exist. Therefore, even though the undeniable proof given by his pictures should have alarmed the true scientific eye, it was impossible, for illusion had already blinded the mind of his peers. Tissot took numerous photographs supporting his discoveries, and that's possibly why his work was strangled from the start, because he had undeniable proof. His second discovery regarding the cellular structure and related to the causes of pathologies was that the Coccis colibacillearis are the primary fermentative elements of any organism, Bécham's microzyma. Tissot came to this conclusion after observing that these fermentative substances were present in all fermented liquids of the body, urine, saliva, milk, digestive enzymes, but also in all pathological liquids under its other forms of Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Pneumococcus, or Enterococcus. These findings made him edict a number of new founding principles concerning biology. To begin with, a cell's structure relies on the organization of weight-lifting organites, which make the skeleton of the cell. According to Tissot, they are the basic living entities. They are alive since they constantly multiply, and Tissot explains mitosis through their multiplication. However, we do not have much more information on them, as Tissot was a pioneer whose work was never validated or contradicted. These observations had Tissot edict two principles concerning the origins of disease. First, every bacterial species is a temporary form of the matter of an organized being, be it animal or botanic. Second, there are only two true causes to disease: the ingestion of rotten or partially rotten food, or the organic imbalance creating within the body the fermentation of organites into bacteria, the best example of this being the common cold. Therefore, according to Tissot, contagion comes only from diet and rather similar environmental conditions than actual bacterial transmission. He proved it by obtaining diphtheria bacilli through several means, some of which were internal. It is an elementary biological truth that every organism is composed of smaller living entities which collaborate and do anything or everything they have to keep the organism alive. Well, when you transpose this evidence to any institution, be it governmental, like the FDA, or private, like the Institut Pasteur, it makes a lot of sense that any discovery that would make the institution crumble to death is unwelcomed by its members, and they might do everything in their power to suppress or discredit that information. Thus, Tissot was not fighting against just one entity, Pasteur, as was Bichon, but instead had the entire organism fighting against him. Also, if we could associate Tissot with a virus, a positive one perhaps in that case, we would realize that viruses never succeed in killing an organism unless they duplicate and take over the organism's supplies, consequently making every entity of the organism less resistant to the virus's poison, in this case potentially the truth. When we take a close look at the Institut Pasteur, we can suppose that it was created with a noble intent, but when looking at its budget, we understand that it would die off if it were proven that vaccinations are unnecessary, which was one implication of Tissot's theories. Therefore, Tissot's works, ideas, and manuscripts were strangled even before having a chance to be published. As he writes, quote, "When in 1926 I wanted to publish at the Académie des Sciences and in other scientific societies the results of my research being the object of the first volume of my book Constitution des organismes animaux et végétaux, cause des maladies qui les atteignent, they refused this publication. Furthermore, a directive was passed on to principal medical journals to forbid any publicity on my research." Unquote. In 1937, Tissot was invited at the Museum of Natural History only to be violently verbally assaulted by a group of scientists, most of which were members of you guess what institute. As Dr. Fugera depicts, quote, "This explosion of sectarianism suffocated me. It was hatred that was present on the faces of those against this great modest of Tissot. A real pack of savages unleashed even the pacific who was standing out by his violence, brandishing his umbrella like a tomahawk. This explosion of hatred immediately gave me this conviction. Tissot is putting his finger on something other than just scientific matters. Considerable material interests would be ruined if his concepts turned out real." Unquote. Now, one might think that this debate is something of the past, for we now have access to such advanced technology like electronic microscopes, which enable us to visualize infinitely small elements in 3 dimensions. However, do you truly believe that the fixating methods used to prepare the cells for observation have changed since the time of Tissot? I seriously doubt it, as why would anyone question these methods if there exists no doubt about them? Also, Tissot created an association in which the members refuse vaccinations by exposing its dangers, the name of which is Santé et Liberté, health and freedom. All of the above reasons explain why Tissot is not present in any encyclopedia, and why in Wikipedia they simply present him as a rogue scientist whose theories were never validated by the scientific community. Well, of course, they were never tested and never even allowed publication to begin with. May his soul rest in peace and his ideas flourish again in the future. Okay, thank you for listening. I hope these segments will inspire you and help to bring more balance and understanding in your life. Feel free to send me your questions and comments by voice message via your podcast platform or through the contact form on the Ureconnect website. Until next time, ciao ciao.